Andrew Tate returning, coming back from retirement from kickboxing to make his official boxing debut against heavyweight champion of the world, Chase DeMoor. This is the big one. This is the one that they have been brewing up for some time.
Yeah, if Top G loses, then the whole internet is going to go berserk.
Chase his ass, I'm going to be honest. I'll be honest, man. You know, he's improved, but he's still ass. So he's not beating Andrew Tate. I think Tate's going to stop Chase DeMoor, and it's just going to build the hype up for another Andrew Tate fight in 2026.
We have Judgment Day this weekend. Heavyweight showdown between Anthony Joshua as he takes on the toughest fighter in his career, El Gallo Jake Paul.
Jake is going to get knocked out.
Anything over 2 rounds for Jake Paul would be just a confidence booster for him.
Yeah, if Jake Paul doesn't break his fights, it should be Anthony Joshua by murder. I expect Jake Paul to leave the ring in a stretcher and with a oxygen mask over his face. If I don't see any of that, then boxing is rigged.
Welcome back to another episode of the Last Round Podcast, where we cover everything from traditional boxing to influencer boxing and everything in between. Today's episode, we'll be going over Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua this upcoming week, and also Andrew Tate versus Chase DeMoor on Misfits Mania. But before we get into the episode, make sure to like and subscribe and follow us on all forms of social media. Lastly, we're trying to build up a community on Discord, and you guys joining would be greatly appreciated. And now, diving into the episode, we have Judgment Day this weekend. Heavyweight showdown between Anthony Joshua as he takes on the toughest fighter in his career, El Gallo Jake Paul. This fight was a last-minute replacement for Jake Paul. Like, I think we all know that Jake Paul was set to fight Gervonta Tank Davis back in October or November, early November, but the fight was scrapped, and ultimately Anthony Joshua came in, saved the day, and allowed Jake Paul to have at least one more fight to close off 2025. Now, this fight has been not really brewing. It was in the air for quite some time before it got announced, but it's official. We're a week away from it. And what are your guys' thoughts about Judgment Day?
Yeah, I'm very excited, man. You know, I have a lot to say about this fight. I think, you know, the boxing fans, we have been asking for Jake Paul to fight somebody, a real boxer. You know, not an ex-UFC fighter, not an old, retired Mike Tyson. Someone in his prime, in your weight class, similar age. And, you know, Jake is now going up against Anthony Joshua, who is a former unified champion in the heavyweight division. 6'5". He weighs like 240 to 260. I mean, he's built like crazy. This is what we've been asking for. So I'm super excited going into this fight, specifically because Jake is going to get knocked out. You know, it's clear as day. There is no universe in which Jake Paul is going to do absolutely anything to Anthony Joshua. We're gonna be able to get a highlight reel KO of Jake Paul to end off the year. And what better send off to 2025 than that? So I'm excited.
You guys seriously are doubting Jake Paul? I cannot believe you guys. Jake Paul's a serious fighter. I cannot believe that you guys are just downplaying Jake Paul as if he hasn't been training for the past 7 years.
Yeah, and you also got to take into consideration Anthony Joshua he's coming off of a KO loss to Daniel Dubois, so maybe Jake Paul can get in there and, you know, knock him out and land that overhand right hand. You know, that's what the Glazers are saying of Jake Paul. They're saying, oh, Anthony Joshua, you know, he's chinny. You know, he's been knocked out before by even a smaller fighter, Andy Ruiz. He's been knocked out by Andy Ruiz. He's just coming off of a KO loss against Daniel Dubois. Maybe Jake Paul has a chance. And to that I say, you know, there's levels to this, right? We talk about Jake Paul, and I've never been a hater of Jake Paul. I think, well, I have actually.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't lie.
You're right. Let me rephrase. I have been a hater of Jake Paul, but I have respected him. I think he definitely, he's not a YouTuber. He's actually a boxer. He's dedicated his life to boxing, and you really do have to tip your hat off to that and say, he's a millionaire. He didn't have to do boxing, and he decided to do it. So hats off to that. With that being said, there's still levels to this, man. Jake Paul, he's a good starting prospect, maybe in the cruiserweight division. He's nowhere near the world championship level. And now he's getting put up against the Lion, Anthony Joshua. This guy's a former unified champion. I don't care he got knocked out his last fight against Danny Dubois. Danny Dubois is he's a former world champion. This guy hits hard, he's big, he's fast, he's explosive. There's levels to this. You're not going to tell me you're going to compare Jake Paul to Danny Dubois. So I just think the people that are riding with Jake Paul, they're in over their head. And I don't think they really understand the amount of damage that AJ is capable of. This guy is the real deal. Former unified champion. Put some respect on his name.
Yeah. I think something that I want to say is the fact that, here at the Last Run podcast, obviously we're not really giving any... we don't think that Jake Paul has a chance of winning. If we just look at the list of pros and cons through a logical and just being perspective and unbiased, there's a lot more cons riding for Jake than for AJ. AJ, decorated amateur boxer, and has had quite a bit of success as a professional. And he's been at the top many times before, you know what I'm saying, against guys who, have also had, their merit and, but yeah, the one thing that I am looking forward out of this, especially because it's fight week, I just want to be entertained. I want to see entertainment. I want Jake Paul to go in and above and beyond during the last few press conferences at the weigh-ins. I want him to try to get a reaction out of AJ because, he's not going to beat AJ, so might as well try to put something up on the scoreboard. You know what I'm saying? Get him flustered, get him mad during the weigh-ins or during the press conference, just to have that little moral victory, I guess, outside of the ring. But that's all I'm asking for. I have seen some people like Aiden Ross say that he's going to put $100,000 on Jake Paul. Jake Paul has stated that he has had other people tell him that they're going to put money on this fight, and it's going to be on him. And I find it laughable, but I think it's all entertaining at the end of the day, and I think it's people that are needing a tax write-off. Yeah,
it's funny that you mentioned that, because there have been some prominent people that have talked about this fight, and specifically, Aiden is a more streamer. He's not really involved too much. I guess he technically is. He's a promoter now, right, in the influencer boxing space. But with that being said, there's also been other guys like I've seen Demetrius Johnson, Mighty Mouse, talk about this fight. Sean O'Malley, former MMA champion, talk about this fight. And they're talking if Jake Paul can catch him with the right hand, maybe he could hurt him. It's guys, no, he can't fucking hurt him. What are you talking about? And I feel like one thing that they always do is they always go back to Andy Ruiz, because they're if you look at Andy Ruiz like a casual, let's think about a casual's perspective. They look at Andy Ruiz and they see a fat, out of shape, chubby Mexican that probably doesn't even deserve to be in the heavyweight division, much less the top of it, right? And much less fighting for a world title. But the looks deceive you. Andy Ruiz is a monster. He's a killer. He's fast. He's explosive. At least he was in his prime. Now I wouldn't say that about him now. But in his prime, he was a dangerous fighter. And yeah, he's fat, but that don't mean he's quick and explosive. I mean, he's got power. To say that just because Andy Ruiz was able to hurt Anthony Joshua and stop him, and then say, oh, Jake can do the same thing. No, he fucking can't. They're completely different fighters. And Jake there's levels to this. This is the thing that's mind-boggling to me, is people don't really understand the level that Jake Paul is at. And they try to compare him to AJ's past opponents. all of AJ's past opponents would beat Jake Paul. You know, Jake Paul's not even in the same weight class. He's going up to heavyweight to fight Anthony Joshua. He's not a true heavyweight, so he's gonna get hurt. And you know, like you said, this isn't, at the end of the day, it's an entertainment type of fight. But the only entertainment that I'm worried about is seeing Jake Paul on the canvas knocked out cold.
Yeah, a lot of people bringing up Andy Ruiz, bringing up Daniel Dubois, bringing up how inactive Anthony Joshua has been, how he's not the same fighter, this and that. This is kind of the same similar talking points that they had when Ngannou was going to fight Anthony Joshua. You know, Ngannou was coming off from losing against the former heavyweight world champion Tyson Fury, and in a controversial scorecard decision. And a lot of people were saying, "Oh, he's taking on Anthony Joshua." Well, Anthony Joshua, he's pretty chinny. He's not the same Anthony Joshua he was back in his prime, this and that. Ngannou is a power puncher. If he dropped Tyson Fury, if he's able to catch a chinny glass jaw like Anthony Joshua, he's going to spark him out, this and that. And then what happened? Anthony Joshua sparked him out in two. So this is the same type of... We're going through the same pattern all over again that we had from the Ngannou, not to the Jake Paul. The only difference is that it's a lot more delusional, thinking that Jake Paul is actually going to land that right and, you know, he might have a chance of knocking out Anthony Joshua. It's not going to happen. Let's be real. It's entertainment at the end of the day. Respect to Jake Paul. I think that's the best thing you can give him for this fight, is for actually taking on Anthony Joshua. Even though, personally, for me, I think that he was kind of forced to take this fight based on Netflix wanting him to fight a big name in order for his fight to be staged on Netflix. So I think Anthony Joshua was one of the few opponents that Netflix had selected for him to pick out for his upcoming fight. So he was kind of backed up into a corner. But regardless, he's still taking on Anthony Joshua. But the truth is that the delusion that they had was Ngannou potentially beating Anthony Joshua is being passed on to Jake Paul, and I think that's even more diluted to even think that he even has a chance of beating AJ. And the thing is, AJ, he's taking it serious. I mean, he's training with Team Usyk. He stated it. Anthony Joshua has always been very professional. He's always into his fights, you know, very well trained, had a good camp, this and that. Of course, there's always critique about his mental status, about his grit, his courage, this and that. But at the end of the day, when he says he had a good camp or that he's taking things serious, he's taking things serious. So it's, you know, I would be very surprised if Jake Paul can get out of the fight or last longer than 2 rounds. And I think if he does manage to last longer than 2 rounds against Anthony Joshua, that'd be a big confidence boost for Jake Paul, because then he could say, "Oh, Francis Ngannou couldn't do it, but I could. That makes me better than Ngannou." Him and Ngannou have already had some beef in the past, so it kind of brew up that. So anything over 2 rounds for Jake Paul would be, you know, just a confidence booster for him for this fight.
I think it's funny, going back to the Francis Ngannou in AJ fight. I thought it was crazy because I think another thing that we should also explain is the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, Francis Ngannou had just left the UFC organization, right? I'm pretty sure he had that beef with Dana White, and I think Francis Ngannou didn't want to pay some money or whatever, and so, you know, him and Dana ended on bad terms, and I think that's when he signed over to PFL, and then he had these 2 boxing matches, you know, Fury, and then he went up against AJ. Going up against AJ, there was a lot of, you know, people still saw him maybe as the UFC champion. You know, they still saw him as a killer, right? Someone who was walking around in his prime, someone who, you know, has shown in his fights that if he is able to touch his opponent with that right hand, he's putting that opponent to sleep. And then he did a pretty good job against Tyson Fury, you know, and that was what, 10 rounds, 8 rounds? 10 rounds, and he performed really well. Like, I think a lot of people were surprised in the fact how that fight went down. And then for them to then, when he was going to go up against Anthony Joshua, they figured that Anthony Joshua was going to struggle. You know, Anthony Joshua, I believe, wasn't didn't look too. What's the word? His stock within the public's eye was down. I think he had already had those losses against Usyk, and so he was just trying to slowly kind of get back into the spotlight. Get back to the top, and so he just took this fight with Francis, and he destroyed him because that's how it should be. There's levels to this, and I really find it amazed, or what's the word? I find it so surprising, the fact that there's quite a few people who maybe they're not very, very well known within the boxing game or whatever, whether it's the professional, traditional, or the influencer side, but for them to go and rally up against or rally with Jake Paul kind of surprises me. We talked about those people right there. And then we also have a whole bunch of like different streamers that are just riding with Jake Paul. So I don't know if it's just them trying to be in the good graces of Jake Paul, or if they actually do believe that Jake Paul has a chance.
Well, at the end of the day, they are casuals. So, we do have to take their opinion with a grain of salt. But with that being said, I think there's also something else that is at play, which is that I think it's a consensus in the public's eye that Jake rigs his fights. And people don't really know how. They don't really know exactly what. They can't point to anything specific, right? They don't really have actual evidence, but they just have a feeling. They just say, oh, a great example is that Tyron Woodley fight against Jake Paul, the second one, where Jake knocks him out cold, right? They play it back like 5 seconds, and they say, oh, look, Jake did this sign with his right hand that he was going to throw it. They're reaching for straws, and that's why this, I don't know why this narrative has grown so strong. Everyone is saying that, Jake's fight's rigged somehow, some way, maybe in the contract, maybe he offers them extra money, this and that his opponent has to go easy on him or his opponent can't knock him out. And I've never thought that. I don't think Jake Paul rigs his fights at all. I think they're all I think they're clean, just like any other regular fight. I just think he picks his opponents very intelligently, and he gets the most advantage to himself, right? He picks Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley's tiny compared to Jake Paul, and if Jake lands a good right hand on Tyron Woodley, who's smaller than him, yeah, he's gonna knock him out. That's not rocket science. That's just regular physics. That's to be expected. So in this fight, though, he doesn't have any advantage at all. And maybe I think people are still thinking that, oh, in the contract, some little clause is saying that Anthony Joshua has to go easy on him, or Anthony Joshua can't knock him out. They have to go the full distance. I don't think so. I think they're just, I just don't believe that. I don't even think that's legal, first of all. I'm pretty sure that's not even legal to begin with. I don't think any sanctioning body would approve of that, because I'm sure they look over the contracts. So it's just, I think that's what's at play. And a lot of these guys that we're like naming, most of them are, they're casuals or influencers. And then the guys in the UFC, even then, I take those guys' opinions with a grain of salt. Mighty Mouse, he's one of the GOATs of the UFC, highly respected, super high boxing IQ, but I don't think he knows. He's too tapped into boxing. His lane is the UFC, and his opinion. We can hear his opinion, but it's not that. I don't take it, for word, like what he's saying. I just, Jake Paul has no chance in winning this fight. He's gonna get hurt. He's gonna get knocked out. It's gonna be bad. It's gonna be a highlight reel KO. The internet is gonna meme Jake Paul for a lot of time. But what I'm thinking is gonna happen is that Jake is gonna take this loss, and he's gonna be really humble about it. He's gonna get knocked out, and in the post fight, he might even get sent to the hospital, honestly. But after the fight, he's gonna get on an interview and he's gonna say, respect to my opponent. I try to do something great. I'm just a YouTuber. A couple years ago, I'm just a YouTuber, and I did my best. I tried my hardest. I worked hard. I trained hard to try to beat Anthony Joshua, but Anthony Joshua is a former unified world champion, and I chased greatness. And then people like boxing analysts are gonna take that and they're gonna say, Jake Paul, he tried to be great, which is what he's trying to do. He's trying to beat a former unified world champion. That's hard. That's difficult in Jake Paul's perspective. So I think it's gonna be maybe 24 to 72 hours of just memeing Jake Paul on the canvas, and then after that, the boxing community they're gonna give him a little bit of respect. They're gonna say, at least he had the balls to go in there with Anthony Joshua. They're gonna say, they're gonna look at the haters and they're gonna say, well, you're a hater. Would you go up against Anthony Joshua if would you go up against him? You'd be scared. You'd be terrified to go up against him. So I think that's what they're gonna spin, because there's no way he's winning. So I'm sure Jake Paul's team is in damage control. They're trying to find a formula to spin the narrative so boxing fans can still accept him.
That's so funny. I think going based off of that same thinking, that means that maybe Jake Paul's team knows that they're gonna lose. So now, it's like, what's damage control? What's plan B? Is, get people to say, Jake Paul should be respected for taking this fight. I feel like maybe in a way, going along of that same thinking is the fact that this is Jake Paul's acceptance fight into the boxing mainstream, right? This is the fight that now people are going to say, he's beaten all these MMA guys, all these influencer guys, but when it came and said and done, he actually stepped up and got into the squared ring, and he fell down short, but at least he got into it.
Mm-hmm.
At least he got into the ring. Mm-hmm. But going based off what you said earlier about Jake Paul rigging his fights, I was never of that thinking, and I think people who did say that, I think they were just mad and salty for the fact that maybe they put money against Jake Paul and maybe they lost it, and so maybe they were trying to find some type of logical or illogical reasoning as to why Jake Paul is winning all these fights against actual fighters or whatever, or ex UFC MMA fighters or whatever. And I was always thinking that Jake Paul is not rigging his fights. He's being calculated in the opponents that they get him. But when he fought against Woodley, I saw a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's the right hand." He signaled to Woodley that he's about to throw that right hand, that cannon. But I didn't think that. I thought maybe he had rigged it when Woodley was down, face down, ass up, and then they had a dude wipes on the back of his trunks. I was like, ain't that like a funny way to like market a company or whatever?
It's the perfect advertising.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, in all reality, I'm not expecting much of Jake Paul. I mean, just like how a lot of people were, even just casual people, or even just the MMA community that was seeing Francis put up a decent performance against Fury, and then they assumed that Anthony Joshua was going to be met with the same fate. It was not like that. Ever since then, I'm pretty sure Francis has had one fight since then, and we haven't really heard much of him. I don't think it's going to be this exact same way, but I think Anthony Joshua is going to make this look super easy. Well,
speaking of Ngannou's an idiot, man. Like, he got offered the fight to fight Jake Paul. He was Netflix was pressuring Jake Paul. They gave him a list of opponents that he had to pick from, or else they weren't going to do his event. After Gervonta Davis was dropped, and one of them was Francis Ngannou. And Ngannou went on the Ariel Helwani show and said, "Yes, I was approached by Jake's team, and they were asking me if I was willing to fight, to step in, and they were offering me a lot of money." And he made this like stupid excuse saying like, I didn't know if it was real, or I didn't know if they were serious. Something stupid. And like he just completely fumbled a bag, because Ngannou would have knocked out Jake Paul easy. That would have been a very easy fight for Ngannou. Jake would have been petrified. He would have pissed his pants before even walking to the ring. So yeah, I don't know. Ngannou is a strange person. He's had fallout with the UFC. Dana White talks shit about him constantly. He's in the PFL, and he hasn't really made super big waves ever since he got knocked out by Anthony Joshua. He just completely fumbled this bag. I don't know what he was doing with this fight, but with that being said, if anybody is comparing Jake Paul to Francis Ngannou, that's just it's a false comparison. Ngannou was an actual fighter, and he was a world champion in the UFC, and he's still young, you know, or at least he's still in his prime, you know, prime fighting years. So, yeah, if Ngannou didn't have a chance against Anthony Joshua, what the hell makes you think that Jake Paul is going to have a chance?
Look, the worst case scenario for Jake Paul is he gets one-shotted, highlight reel KO, fucking drop dead to the canvas. Worst type scenario right there for Jake Paul. Second worst would be him, you know, maybe getting dropped once or twice and then the referee stopping it, right? It's a lot more, you know, manageable. At least he didn't get sparked out. But, you know, there's so many scenarios that can happen this upcoming weekend for Jake Paul. The most unlikely would be him knocking out Anthony Joshua, or him, much less him beating Anthony Joshua. But it's an 8-rounder. Remember, Anthony Joshua cannot go over 245, I believe. So the thing is, Jake Paul is once again moving up in weight, like we mentioned. He fought Chavez Jr. at cruiserweight, and he stated that their goal was to be at 230 for fight night. And during the time when they were asking him that, or when he said that, he said he was currently 215. So he still had a couple more pounds left to add on. But that right there is an issue because he's going to be slow as fuck, bro. Slow as fuck. He's going to be heavy. He's going to be flat-footed as hell. I see no chance for him to even land anything significant throughout this fight that will probably last 1-2 rounds. So overall, I think it should be a fun night. I think it should be very entertaining to see. I'm just very intrigued to see Anthony Joshua staring at Jake Paul across the ring, and then the first, the bell ringing for the start of the fight. So I'm very intrigued by that. I'm interested. It should be a fun night of boxing, Judgment Day as they dubbed it. Thing is, I think that if Jake Paul does get knocked out, especially if he gets sparked out, I think that's the end of his career, honestly. I mean, look at Ngannou. He hasn't really done much after getting sparked out in grand fashion, and they KO of the year winner, I'm pretty sure, in 2023. So if something similar like that happens to Jake Paul, I really don't see him coming back from boxing. I really think this was like a last opponent that he wanted. Of course, he wanted to fight Anthony Joshua someday, but I think it happened a bit more sooner than he anticipated it. So this might be his final send-off. And if it does happen, then, thanks, Jake Paul. You can just be a promoter now. But I think now that we've kind of talked about the fight, do you guys want to give your predictions?
Yeah, if Jake Paul doesn't break his fights, it should be Anthony Joshua by murder. Absolutely. I expect Jake Paul to leave the ring in a stretcher and with a oxygen mask over his face. If I don't see any of that, then boxing is rigged.
You're not lying. I'm gonna be honest, because it's kind of scary, thinking about what's gonna happen to Jake. When I envision this fight, this is what I'm envisioning, right? Jake goes in there, he's shitting his pants. And that's normal, right? I'd be shitting my pants if I was fighting Anthony Joshua. So he goes in there, he's shitting his pants. The bell rings, and he kind of goes in there, and he starts kind of back foot, trying to use lateral movements. He's trying to move around, trying to just stick and move, right? AJ stays calm, composed. He knows what he's doing. I think he's going to get out of the first round, because I don't think AJ is going to go in there and just in a minute, he's going to try to finish the fight. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to go into the second or maybe even the third round. And AJ is just gonna wait. He's gonna wait. He's gonna be pushing forward, but he's gonna stay calm and let Jake Paul, get all those nervous jitters out of his body. And once Jake maybe tries to throw a right hand, he's gonna absolutely miss. AJ's gonna catch him clean, and he's gonna hurt him, or if not, drop him. And then boom, AJ's gonna go in the killer instinct mode, go right on top of Jake Paul and knock him out. Devastating fashion. So I agree. I think Jake could get hurt bad in this fight, so he should be praying to God that he just gets knocked out with the right hand or something and no structural damage is done to his skull, because AJ hits fucking hard. So I'm expecting a knockout under 3 rounds.
It's true. Jake Paul, even though Jake Paul has the knack of appearing very nervous before his fights, especially during the walkouts, more notably against Tommy Fury, the only other boxer in which he's fought on his resume in a fight that he lost. So now imagine going from like a boxer of Tommy Fury level, which is mediocre, to a elite world championship level like Anthony Joshua. That's a crazy difference in skill. So I can imagine how petrified Jake Paul will be when he sees Anthony Joshua across the ring, as I'm pretty sure either Jimmy Lennon or Michael Buffer announcing, doing the fighter introduction. So I'm expecting no more than 2 rounds. Honestly, anything more than 2, I think it's a little embarrassing. I can't lie. But I think it should be an ass whooping. And I think that, or I believe that Anthony Joshua should, if he doesn't get him sparked out, it's going to be a TKO. But he's going to get him out of there before 2. So I think we're all in agreement. Yeah. I think nearly everyone, like 99%, is in agreement that Anthony Joshua will be beating Jake Paul this upcoming weekend. The 1% are the delusional Twitter glazers who are just doing it for rage baiting and for clicks and attention. So it should be a fun night. It should be very funny to see this happen. And regardless of what happens, Twitter's going to be blowing up. So I think it's a good, it should be a good night this upcoming weekend of Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua on Judgment Day. But switching over to another event going on on that same day over in Dubai, we got Misfits Mania. I always say this, so I'm going to say it again. We rarely talk about Misfits now. It's kind of dying. I can't lie. It's nothing too crazy has been going on. KSI, ever since he left, it kind of left a little gap in there, I feel. And they're not hitting as much, but this is the big one. This is the one that they have been brewing up for some time, and it is what they're calling it their biggest card of the year, because they got a massive name added to the Misfits roster, which is the new CEO, Andrew Tate, coming back from retirement from kickboxing to make his official boxing debut against the pound-for-pound, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, Chase DeMoor. Now, Chase DeMoor is on like a 9-fight win streak, or like an 8 or whatever. He's been winning. He hasn't lost since his first couple fights, so he's been improving. He's shown that he's got skills and grit and discipline, and he keeps backing it up. He keeps winning. So, does Andrew Tate have problems? It should be worried about going up against a fighter of the caliber of Chase DeMoor, who is currently the Misfits heavyweight world champion, or should Chase DeMoor be cautious of Andrew Tate, even though Andrew Tate may be older? He does have experience with combat sports. What are your guys' thoughts about this matchup?
Yeah, this is for me. Okay, so it's fight week, right? Mm-hmm. These two guys have very interesting styles, right? None of them are your traditional boxers or whatever. Chase DeMoor is a guy who wanted to become a NFL player, didn't pan out that way. Then gets on a reality TV show, which, he had his moments here and there. And I think he's been riding off of that success for a very long time. Ever since he got into the boxing game, the first few fights were not that great. Especially that first one was horrible. I was expecting Chase to not box really, much longer after that. But, he stuck with it. And now, I feel like good things happen to those who stay patient and are, work hard and stuff. And, we've been seeing that from, Chase DeMoor. Chase DeMoor, I've said it before, he's your traditional influencer fighter. This guy just had a really big social media following and, converted that to, being a fighter. And it's, from an unbiased perspective, maybe you can say, he started off, rough, but now it seems as though he's doing a lot better. On the other side, Andrew Tate is a guy who's had a lot of experience when it comes to was it kickboxing? He was a world champion in that sport. So he's coming into this fight with fighting experience, and that plays a huge factor in fights like this. But boxing is a little different. I mean, I have seen clips of him hitting the mitts, doing sparring, and some of those movements are a little unorthodox. So I'm expecting an interesting fight. So I'm curious to see how things play out Saturday.
Yeah. This fight's funny to me. I think Chase DeMoor, whenever you think about him, his clips from his first fight always go viral, right? And everyone is always just making fun of him. And this is actually leading into this fight. People are putting that clip of him in his first fight, and they're saying, this is Andrew Tate's opponent. And they just, shitting on him, right? And I'll be honest, Chase has improved, right? But he's still super bad. He's just so unathletic when it comes to boxing. It just seems like he's so stiff, and he's like, his body doesn't move in sync when he's throwing his punches. He just looks strange, man. It doesn't look right when he throws, and it just I don't know, man. It just doesn't look like an actual boxer. And he's fought a lot. I thought he'd improve at a faster pace. He hasn't. He's still very novice. And now he's going up against Andrew Tate, who he does have a lot of experience, but it is kickboxing. And he hasn't fought in like a long time. He also smokes cigars like daily. And, so he's also older as well. What is he, like 40, 38, 39? He's on the older side. He's an older fighter, retired. So I think Chase is confident going into this fight. With that being said, though, I just don't think he has the skills to keep up with Tate. I just don't see it happening, man. Chase is just way too novice. He's going to go in there. He's going to get scared. He'd put his hands up weird, throw weird punches, and just look completely like an amateur. And I'm pretty sure Tate's gonna go in there. He's gonna be composed. He also has an unorthodox style. I agree with that. He doesn't look like a typical boxer, but I do think because of his experience, I think he's gonna use his jab a lot. He's gonna use those weird head movements that he has. He has kind of strange head movements. He has his hands down, strange head movements. The only thing I can see being a problem is if Tate gets a little too overconfident, because, like I said, he does have his hands down. So if he just starts trying to rely on his reflexes, that's dangerous, because he's not a boxer. So he doesn't have the typical boxer head movement, waist movement. He could get caught. It's definitely possible that he can get caught by Chase DeMoor. And Chase is a big guy. So if he lands a clean right hand, it's going to hurt. So that's the only way I can see any path to victory for Chase. If Tate gets a little too overconfident, keeps his chin exposed. Another weakness from Andrew Tate, keeping his chin too exposed. That's the only way. But besides that, I'm thinking a clear Andrew Tate victory. Maybe even a stoppage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had their face-to-face kind of interview going on last week or sometime last week, and Andrew Tate brought up the fact that, hey, I have a lot to lose. If I do lose to you in this fight, which is true. I mean, Andrew Tate, he's outside of the boxing, his persona, he's very controversial personality online. So him losing, he embodies the top G. And so for him to lose against Chase DeMoor, they're just going to be like, yo, Andrew Tate first, they post a clip of him losing. Let's say he gets stopped. Oh, Andrew Tate got stopped, this and that. This is your top G, this and that. And then they'll probably clip also the clip of Chase DeMoor was his awkward against Bruckner, and that, the very infamous clip of him. Oh. They're going to say, yo, Chase DeMoor really lost against, or Andrew Tate really lost against this guy. So the top G fandom would go into hysterics. I think it would be the most devastating scenario for them to live in, and I think it would definitely affect his brand. And it would not do any good for him. So Andrew Tate has a lot to lose if he does lose against, especially a fighter like Chase DeMoor. But yeah, I agree. I don't see him losing just because of the experience, and I think he has a far greater skill set than Chase DeMoor, and I think he's a lot more just composed, a more composed fighter than Chase, who has shown in a lot of his fights, nearly every one of them, that he gets very emotional in there and he starts throwing haymaker, like the ones where he gets disqualified when he dropped the dude and he hit him with like a 20-piece nugget fucking combination on the floor.
He did the Izzy celebration as well, right?
He didn't do the Adesanya celebration on him. Bro, that shit was so funny. But even besides that, I mean, every time he feels he has you hurt or he feels uncomfortable, he gets a little bit too emotional, loses his composure, and that's where Andrew Tate could capitalize in that manner. So there's a lot more for Andrew Tate, regarding his skill sets, his experience, that I believe are going to play a factor over a fighter like Chase DeMoor. But that being said, Chase DeMoor is huge. They have him down at 6'5". He's a massive guy, bro. So that's what Chase DeMoor really has to bring in, just being very physical in there and trying to impose as much, trying not to respect Andrew Tate that much and trying to go in there and to showcase, hey, I got the youth, I got the size advantage, and I also got the activity. I mean, he's a very active fighter overall. He's one of the most active influencer fighters on the roster. So those three things would definitely favor on Chase DeMoor's side, but I just think that he just lacks the composure, the experience, and overall just the skill set to really fight a fighter like Andrew Tate, even though Andrew Tate has been retired for some time now. But it's a very fun fight. A lot of people are really seeing beyond this fight for Andrew Tate specifically, saying, okay, after this fight, he's now the CEO of Misfits. Maybe he can get a fight against KSI, which is, I think, a storyline that they're trying to brew up. Maybe a fight against some other big names, former MMA fighter, this and that. So Andrew Tate, Tommy Fury as well. Andrew Tate, I think, has a lot more at stake for this fight than Chase DeMoor, who, if he does lose, he can always come back. But Andrew Tate losing would be a very, very big hit on his brand.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if Top G loses, then the whole internet is gonna go berserk. But I mean, for my prediction for this fight, I'm gonna go with the guy that has a lot more experience. I think in fights like this, I think the guy, whoever has the most experience, is gonna be the one who has a lot more odds to beat the other guy, right? When you think about fighting experience, you think about a guy who's not scared about getting hit in the face because he understands and he has experience and he's almost in some case used to getting being under the fire, getting punches thrown at his face. And I think he'd be very comfortable getting a few punches thrown at his face. But I think Chase DeMoor, he's still a little twitchy. He does tend to have those novices bad tendencies. That Josh Buckner fight, he ate that feint. And I don't even know if that was a counter to that feint. But he does those two wild windmill punches, right? If you can call it that. But he does have that twitchiness that he doesn't know if his opponent is going to come at him or if he should go on the defensive or go on the attack. He's just kind of twitchy. He just kind of reacts to just about everything. And I think I'm expecting Andrew Tate to come in and just be comfortable and be calm and just look for opportunities and find the mistakes that Chase has and expose them, and then come out with a victory.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tate's going to win easily. I don't think Chase is ass, I'm going to be honest. I'll be honest, man. He's improved, but he's still ass. So he's not beating Andrew Tate. So Tate's going to win. And the thing is that everyone is not worried about, but what everyone is thinking about what's next. And I think it's a great opportunity for Andrew Tate. He has a lot of options. He beats Chase DeMoor. Now he's the Misfits world champion, right? So, he has KSI, maybe even Tommy Fury, Darren Till. Like, he has plenty of options, and any of those fights are going to be very big because Andrew Tate by himself is going to be a very big name. So that's actually another thing that I'm very curious about, that this fight isn't going to be on DAZN. It's actually going to be on Rumble Premium. So we're going to be able to see how many people are tuning into the fight. And, it's Andrew Tate's first time as CEO of the company. How many viewers is he going to bring in? Because he is a very big name. So it's a lot of questions. It's very interesting to see how this event is going to do. Personally, I think it's going to do very well. I think a lot of people are going to tune into the fight. And I think Tate's going to stop Chase DeMoor. So I think it's going to go viral on X and Instagram. And it's just going to build the hype up for another Andrew Tate fight in 2026.
Yeah, my prediction, I predict Andrew Tate will also be stopping Chase DeMoor. I think it's going to happen late in the fight once Chase fatigues a bit. But TKO win for Andrew Tate. The options are there. Big names on the list for him as potential opponents for 2026. I think the big one would be, KSI, of course, is a massive one. I think that's probably the biggest one. But the one that makes more sense for me would be Darren Till. Just because Darren Till and Andrew Tate actually have some beef. Darren Till has been constantly calling them out, constantly berating them online, and I think that fight would be huge in the UK as well as a KSI showdown. But that fight for me would be more interesting just because of the beef and the personal interest that they have amongst each other. So that's definitely something on the list that is a potential opponent for Andrew Tate if he does get the victory this upcoming weekend, which we all agree he should. But Andrew Tate himself, I believe it all comes down to him whether or not he wants to keep fighting, or maybe he wins, becomes heavyweight, and then he vacates it and then decides to just stay as CEO, because having a camp at that age, it does, it's pretty draining for your whole physical body. So we'll see what happens next. But regardless, we're all predicting Andrew Tate to get the win over Chase DeMoor. But there are also a couple other big names fights that we are interested to see. I think the next one I want to talk about would be very fast would be Deen the Great as he takes on Amado Vargas. Look, Deen the Great has not fought since last year, or it feels like 2 years ago, against Dave Fogarty. Back a couple Misfits events ago. He's been pretty inactive. Amado Vargas, I think the biggest win he's had is Sean Garcia, where he beat him 2 years ago or last year. So it's a very random matchup for me. I was not expecting it, but it's one that's happening. And what do you guys think about that matchup?
Yeah, just like we said, kind of random. Vargas and the Vargas dynasty. If you follow the sport, you understand that Emiliano is the only one that has actual talent. The other two brothers, they tried their best, but they didn't quite make it. And even then, Emiliano has a tough road to become a world champion at the weight class that he's currently at. But in regards to Amado, I haven't really heard much of him. His stick seems to be like the guy who's you don't want to fuck around and mess around with him, right? He's always wearing shades wherever he's at, whether it's outside or in closed doors. But his best fight was against, or his best win was against Sean Garcia, and Sean Garcia is just Ryan's little brother, so can't give too much merit to that. And so I'm actually don't really care who wins. I'm still going to be very intrigued. If Deen wins, then that's pretty credible. I think it would be the first credible opponent under his resume, apart from Waleed Sharks, because he's had fights against Poli. Who the fuck is bro? I'm not gonna give you fucking merit for beating a guy like Poli. So if he beats Amado, I would give him serious props. But if Amado beats Deen, then I'm not giving him any props, because you went down the traditional boxing lane and now you want to go more into the influencer side. But at 135, maybe him in Misfits could be an interesting addition to the roster. So
yeah, and you wouldn't give Amado credit because Amado should win on paper. Amado, he's fought in the amateurs, right? He has, maybe he wasn't the greatest of amateurs, but he has experience. In the amateurs. He's been boxing for a lot longer than Deen the Great. He's also had a lot more professional boxing fights. And Deen the Great, he's fought, like you said, he hasn't fought the best competition. So Amado should win. Vargas, this should be a very easy fight for him. With that being said, though, on paper it can be deceiving because Amado Vargas just isn't that good, man. And I don't think he's that disciplined. I don't think I don't think he has both feet into the sport. So it's gonna be a little bit hard for him. With that being said, I don't think Deen the Great does either. I think Deen the Great, he likes the idea of being a boxer, but I don't think he's also 2 feet into the sport. I think, he's doing other stuff and, he's just messing around. So, he's been super inactive, which is not a good sign. So it's a fun fight, I'd say. Amado should definitely win. If he doesn't win, it's going to be very embarrassing for him. I'm going to laugh at him next episode if he doesn't. So, Amado Vargas, make your father proud. Go in there, beat the shit out of Deen the Great, and then you have a new career now in Misfits, and you can get paid a lot of money, and that's not a bad living. You can get paid a good amount of money. So, go in there and do your job. Do what we expect you to do.
Yeah, my prediction, I think Amado should be beating Deen the Great. If Deen the Great does pull the upset, I agree with Rudo. First, besides Wally Chark, easily the biggest name of his resume and very credible as well. But Amado should on paper be beating Deen the Great. Deen the Great has, he blames his inactivity based on his injuries, always saying I got shoulder stuff, I got hand stuff, I got this and that. So there's always an excuse for Deen the Great not fighting, and yet he still has the audacity to complain when they drop the pound for pound on Misfits and he's not number one. He's always like, oh, this is a joke, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, bro, you got to be active. So, but beating Amado would definitely catapult him top 3 easily. But Amado Vargas should be getting the win unless he shows up on fight night fighting like absolute ass, which I don't think should be the case, but holy bro. That's so funny, bro. Anyways, did you give your prediction, Rulo?
I'm not gonna give a prediction. I really don't care who wins. Honestly, may the best man win.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you hear that? Well, we kind of gave our predictions for that matchup. Another matchup we're kind of looking forward to, I would say, would be Anthony Taylor. Yeah. Anthony Taylor's taking on Niraj Goyat. Niraj Goyat was supposed to fight the Hitman Slim, but Slim had to back out. He backed out because of hand injuries. He had been suffering from hand injuries for some time now, and he was not able to continue with his camp because of the pain. So Anthony Taylor, after his fight with Dylan Dennis got scrapped as well, decided to take Slim's spot and take on Niraj Goyat. Niraj Goyat last time fought boxing against Anderson Nunes, which was a very random matchup, especially how ass Nunes is. So Goyat and Anthony Taylor is kind of a random up in the air toss up for me. Goyat has Zepeda in his resume, which is another random name to have on his resume, considering the fact that Zepeda was a serious contender during that time. But on paper, I mean, it's interesting, it's intriguing, a little random. But I think that Anthony Taylor should be losing this fight.
Yeah. What about you, Awesome? What do you got?
I don't know, man. His fight is a bit interesting to me. Cause this Indian guy, I don't even know how to say his name. He's fought Jose Zepeda, which Zepeda is a credible name. He was a top contender for many years. He was this close to becoming a world champion in boxing at the 140 division. So that's a serious name to have on your resume. And I know he lost, but, that's still very, very impressive. And Anthony Taylor, I don't know, man. He's kind of a weird fighter for me. Sometimes he has really good performances, and then other times he gets whooped, and it seems like he's not on the level of like a Tommy Fury or a Darren Till. He seems completely outclassed in those type of fights. So I don't know. I think Taylor should go in there. I'm sure he's gonna go in there and try to make it messy, try to make it sloppy, make it dirty a little bit. a lot of hugging. But if this Indian guy is smart, he's gonna keep the range and just outbox him, and he should get the easy victory over a guy like Anthony Taylor.
Yeah, Rudo's gone for right now, but look, it should be a fun fight, I would assume. Anthony Taylor very inconsistent. Goyat would have been more of an interesting fight if he had to take on Slim because of their personal beef that they've had between each other for some time now. So I think that Goyat should be winning just based on the experience, and Anthony Taylor not really being that high quality of a fighter that I see him as. But another big fight for the Misfits Mania that was added on. But lastly, the last big name fight that I think that we're interested in seeing would be the return of Tony Ferguson as he takes on the mechanic Warren Spencer. Last time we saw Tony Ferguson, he stopped Salt Poppy, and he also stopped his losing streak as well. So it was a very emotional time. I saw online a lot of Tony Ferguson fans who were literally bawling their eyes out about seeing Ferguson finally win. Ferguson himself was very happy about that. So he's looking to continue this win streak as he takes on Warren Spencer. Quick predictions on that one.
Yeah, it's kind of really hard to determine for me, at least, who to go. I mean, I want to go for the younger guy, the mechanic, but I mean, he doesn't have a resume just like Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson, you know what you're getting yourself into when you get inside the ring or in the octagon, right? A guy who has an extraordinary amount of conditioning, right? He almost seems to never get tired. This guy's known for this, always going and fighting until the very last bell of the fight. But I'm gonna have to go with the younger guy. I think the mechanic is just a guy who is just very excited about the opportunity. Just in general to be on this card, and plus, going up against a UFC legend. But I think he should take it. I've been seeing his the posts that he be posting on social media and stuff like that, and he seems pretty eager, and so I'm gonna go with him.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing Tony Ferguson has is his cardio. Other than that, he doesn't really have anything. Salt Poppy has better skills than him, and the only reason why Salt Poppy lost was because he got scared and he got too drained, and he was on the back foot too much, a little too excited, a little too jittery, and boom, he ended up losing. So, Tony, I really don't place a lot. Maybe this might upset the UFC fans that love Tony Ferguson. I don't think he's that good in boxing. His skill level isn't that good. Just look at his technique. It's not there. So, with that being said, though, I don't know that much about the mechanic. He's fought a couple of times, but I'm not too aware. I really don't care about this fight. I think may the best man win, like you said last time.
I'm predicting a majority draw. Yeah, I'm on the same boat. I just think that Tony Ferguson, him being a big name, him being re-added into this card, especially after the quick turnover from the last Misfits event, just shows that how intrigued or how invested he is in continuing to fight on Misfits. So he's, him being once again on the card, it gives me kind of similar vibes to Darren Till, and the fact that they want to keep on fighting. They like the promotion. They like the opportunity of getting pretty much these easy wins. Therefore, they're going to keep on asking Mams Taylor, hey, keep putting me on the card, And Mams Taylor will be doing this. So he gives me that same vibe. So I'm just happy to see that Tony Ferguson is showing to be a very active fighter on Misfits, and overall a good investment for Misfits at the end of the day. So I'm just, happy to see this fight, and I'm pretty neutral about it as well. But I think we covered everything that we wanted to cover in today's episode. Let us know down below your official predictions for Misfits Mania featuring Andrew Tate as he takes on Chase DeMoor, and also giving us your predictions for Judgment Day, which we will be seeing Anthony Joshua take on El Gallo Jake Paul. Let us know your thoughts and predictions in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to follow, to like and subscribe, and follow us on all forms of social media. We're on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Lastly, we're trying to build up a community on Discord, and you guys joining would be greatly appreciated. This was Pablo, and I'm with Rudo and Asa, and this was the Last Round Podcast. Thank you for watching.